today is super bright, and I was thinking, you know what? This is the perfect day to demonstrate exposure bracketing. Let's go. Do you know something that really grinds my gears? That is when you are following someone that is going 40 in a 60. So clearly don't feel comfortable going 60 in a 60. And then they drive 40 in a 30. They drive 40 in a 30 mile an hour speed limit where there are people living. Children that might run out on the road, but they haven't got the guts to drive 60 on a country road where they're allowed to drive faster than... Oh. Rant over. And what you've got here is like, you have a high dynamic range, you have shadows and a big bright sun. One 30th, still a little bit too low. 20th of a second, there we go, we've got a good exposure there. But what we've got is a completely blown out sky, and then some shadows over here that are really dark. So we're going to go menu, come over to the shooting menu. It's usually, well, it's on the third on this camera, and you see it's expo.comp/AEB auto exposure bracketing, and you got press set on there, then use your shutter speed dial and set that to 2 either side. That means it will go 2 stops below and 2 stops above. If we set ISO to auto, see it's too much, we're going to bring that down a bit again. Yeah, okay, 1/40th of a second looks right. On the menu, sorry, press Q, make sure the drive mode is on high speed continuous, keep that still. So now we're going to go over what you do in Photoshop to blend those 3 exposures together. Essentially what we need to do is we need to take our main exposure, the one that is mostly correct, put in some of the blue sky from the dark exposure and some of the shadows from the bright exposure. And the way we do that is through masks. So let's add a mask to each of the layers. And then we need to invert, so Control I or Command I, depending on if you're using Windows or Mac, because we want the main exposure to be there and then just paint some other parts over the top. So let's click on the first layer, we'll go over to Channels. And this is where we choose the selections, and we do that by you can either do that with RGB or you can do that separately, and really from the bright exposure we only want to be painting in the sky. So if we click Control and then click on blue, that will give us the blue stuff that is the correct exposure in that particular layer. If we come back to layers, click on the mask, make sure we have a white brush. Depending on the exposure, you may want to turn down your kind of opacity, but in this instance I really want to bring back as much of the blue as possible, so I'm doing a 100%. There we go. So that is, in essence, that's the main part done. And really, on some of here, we could probably get away with it actually in just 2 exposures. But to show you what you would do when these parts are a bit too dark, we're going to come over to the next layer. To get the shadows, we need to do things a little bit different. So what we'll do is we get the bright channel, and we will click on the layer, go to channels, Command or Control and click on RGB. Now that's actually going to select all of the highlights. We're then going to do a layer mask to bring through something called Alpha 1. Once we've got our Alpha 1 layer, we can click on that, Control I to invert. So now we have all of the brightest bits that are really showing. And if we Command Shift click, and you can see from here that all of the really bright bits are selected. All the dark bits are not. Click on RGB, come over to layers, and then we can paint in what we want to paint in. Okay, so I'm just going to get a bigger brush. I'll bring that opacity down to 3%. Even bigger brush, come on. Let's get all of it done in one go. So now what we have is, if we deselect everything, you can see that was the original image, and that is what we end up with. And that is how you shoot and edit exposure brackets in Photoshop. Thanks very much and keep learning. I choked on my own spit. And that is how you shoot and edit. Crying out loud.
Stop forgetting the words.
And that is how you shoot and edit exposure brackets in Photoshop. Thanks very much and keep learning. I didn't point. I forgot.